Hey, folks. How's everyone doing? It's Lunch with Mal, and we're live. I'm just going to quickly get the link for Jill so that she can put it in YouTube, or she can put it in the group. Right? Ooh, don't want to get the echo. How's everyone doing today? Sorry, you just got to type. I'm generally really good at typing with these nails, unless I need to do something quickly because they're kind of long. They're like crazy long, but they're substantial. Hey, honey. Oh, thank you, Victoria. It's that I'm sure many people know I wear latex a lot, and I decided to wear a latex hood today and just put a wig on top. So does it look like my chin's not moving? It is. It's moving just as much as normal. Uh, Well, that we can kind of banter a bit while we let more people show up. Well, James, there was a lot of Sith activity that happened over the weekend and whatnot. So we did just watch um, Star Wars Tales from the Underworld, and one of them was a story that followed Count Dooku's assassin Sith lady. So I don't know, maybe something took hold. Stan said I had a call with Stan today, and he said that he really liked it. So I'm rolling with that. It makes it. I told him it hides my double chin, which is why I wear it. It works really well. So we've got a bunch of people on YouTube. Well, I wonder if anybody has found us from Facebook. I'm always kind of curious how well doing a Facebook event on my personal page works. I think it generally works pretty well. But the topic for today that I thought about, oh yeah, it's working. Good, good. The topic for today that I thought about, actually, Jill kind of brought it up as well, is I guess I kind of do, don't I? Man, I loved that game, Knights of the Old Republic. It was so good. I remember the first level of that game where you're just on that one world. It was so detailed and complex. It felt like an entire game all by itself. And then when you went off the world and you got the ship, I'm like, are you kidding me? There's this much more that's going to happen in this game. It was amazing. So, yeah, today's topic is one. It's kind of a lead in into one of our next big courses we're going to be doing, live courses we're going to be doing in school, and it's a strong author foundation. And I was having a conversation with an author just this morning on a call, and she was lamenting the fact that she's been at this for so long, and it always seems like there's something new that she never thought of before. Because I was talking to her about when she's launching her new series, perhaps doing a countdown deal a few days after launch to help boost her rank by dropping, because then you drop when you do a countdown deal, you can do it in the US and UK. You can drop your book down to 99 cents, but for the duration of the countdown deal, still make 70% royalty. So it doubles the royalty of a 99-cent book, which is kind of awesome if you think about it. She's like, wow, she's like, I never thought of doing that. And it seems like a pretty simple thing, but there's lots of simple little things that we don't think about, uh, especially once you've been doing it for a while. And it's kind of a neat thing to do to try to quantify or maybe not quantify, but like identify is what the word I'm looking for. What things actually make up a strong foundation for an author career, and what are some of the things that are sort of just extras that may or may not, be super important, or they're things that you do later on, but aren't part of, you know, the key foundation that you need. Yes, absolutely, peak Star Wars. I completely agree, James. So I'm going to open it up too, like for everybody who's watching. What is like one or two things that you really think is necessary for a strong author foundation? And it doesn't just have to be marketing, it can be writing, it can be tools, it can be skills, all sorts of different things that you think is necessary for a strong foundation. I'm kind of curious where everybody else's head is at for there. It is at for that. There we go. So let me quickly. Finding your readers. Relating to Star Wars, perhaps as well. Everything can everything relate to Star Wars? I'm sure there's a 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon for Star Wars. Actually, what, honey? Jill, tell me. Those are definitely like marketing foundation things. I agree, Victoria. Hopefully that hopefully before that, the book that one is written already relates to readers too. And I think every book relates to someone, right? It'd be crazy if it didn't. None of us are so special that there's no one else like us. So, every one of us has written a book that relates to someone. Absolutely. There's an errant hair there. I'll never get it. Or it's a reflection. Oh, it's just a reflection. Hey, Miss Ocampo. A tribe of author friends to encourage you. I like that one, Desiree. Definitely. Oh, okay. Of course, come on, the people share, honey. All right. James says, I realize that we got people from everywhere, so I should be doing the thing on the screen. Website, email list, and reader group have been my most important assets. And James is wide as well. And shoot, do you do a lot of Kickstarters, James? I'm thinking you do, but I'm suddenly wondering if I've mentally mixed you up with Russell Nolte by accident. Jill said lost leader, reader magnet. Absolutely. Like to James's thing, having a website and an email list, how do you build your website and email list? And certainly organic is one way. Like my initial email list was built entirely organically, just back of book stuff and some author promos back when that actually worked pretty well. But I kept most of those readers separate and accidentally lost them at one point. Well, I lost them and I found them again, but by then it was too late to actually add them back in my list. So I think that really goes hand in hand with website and email list, email funnels. Are you thinking like email funnels that lead on after your reader magnet, honey? Not a lot. Maybe one Kickstarter a year. For most people, that's probably tons, obviously. So I think how many in total does that mean then, James? I mean, I guess it's probably not more than like 5 or 6, right? We are talking about like a different topic right now. Okay, we're talking about like what makes a strong author foundation. So I'm not entirely sure that I can really answer that question here. I'm not sure I can really answer that question anyway. Uh, I mean, generally speaking, what you're looking for is a developmental editor. 5 or 6 is probably puts you above up with the authors who've run the most Kickstarters, aside from the people who do also do things like comic books and stuff like that. Like we've only done 3, although this year is the year of the next. Well, it would have been the year of the next Kickstarter, but now that we're in Canada, we have to decide like how doable is a Kickstarter when you're in Canada and you have a physical product that you'd be giving. So I have to see how that pans out. I do. I mean, I've talked and Jill has talked a lot about the reader magnet, and I think that I have felt for some time and continue to feel that there's like no better way to build your list. I would say at this point, like I have a 10,000 person organic list. So everything on my list came from people who've interacted directly with me. So about half of them at this point are all from back of book. So links to get like add-on chapters or additional short stories from back of book. And about half of them are from Reader Magnet acquisitions. And so I would only have a 5,000 person list if I did not also do the Reader Magnet. And that's like over the years with all of the what am I trying to say here? Unsubscribes that you'll get to, because I mean my mailing list now is it's over 10 years old. So and like I said, I pruned off 20,000 people at one point as well. I mean, yeah, except for the fact that they're going to make you pay duty when you bring all the books over, James. Like, I mean, yes, you'll save a ton of money because of media mail, but you still got to cross the border with like a ton of books. So like, it'd be a car full of books. Pretty sure they'd notice that and they'd be like, "Cool, we're going to charge you a shit ton of money for all of these." That I'm like, I'm not crossing the border to the United States in the next 4 years. So there's that. Although we had discussed we have some friends in the United States who actually do shipping as part of their business, and we might actually consider sending things to them to get them shipped. So so yeah. So I forget, James, you don't have a reader magnet though, do you? Am I completely misremembering? Remember, like I think you've just done sort of you've brute forced it over the years, right? And you're very focused on your website, which I think is a good thing too. Whenever I think of Cardinals, by the way, now I always think of the bird. So I just imagine a bunch of birds that just picked a new pope because that's that's how they roll for sure. Um, but like, what about like not marketing stuff? What about like the actual writing of the book kind of thing? I'm kind of curious um, what people think of the foundations there when it comes to actually crafting the books. Yeah, you Amazon gets weird with what they put books in. It used to be that we could pick them all, and then they decided that they would pick them all. And the idea, I think, was that people were stuffing categories with the wrong books. And since Amazon took far more control, it doesn't seem to be any better than it was before. Oh, okay. Maybe that's what it was. Do you use it a lot? Was it something that was like a big part of your process, James? I'm going to drive to your house, by the way, James, and you can ship all my books for me. How's that? I'll just bulk mail them to you. You'll get a pallet. You'll be like, wow, cool. I got a lot of books. Thanks. But I think when it comes to like, having a strong author foundation, I think there's no substitute for reading the genre you write. Okay, that's what I remember. I remember seeing it. But once you mentioned it, I remembered seeing it somewhere when we talked about it. I was like looking at all your properties and everything. But you don't run any ads for it or anything, do you? Um, I've a lot of times I encounter authors who are writing in new genres because they think it's interesting or cool, or they have an idea that they think is pretty fun, but they've never actually read the genre before. And every now and then, someone does that, and it works because they like works really well because they sort of just like lucked out and landed in the middle of the genre. Um, but for most people that do very well in a genre, I mean, unless they have the clout to define a new genre, like paranormal women's fiction, um, that was made by a group of women originally. Um, there's no substitute for really knowing the genre and knowing what people like. And the great thing too is if you read a genre a bunch, and there's a lot of books in the genre that you like, and you think you could tell stories like them, then you kind of have a built-in audience right away, right? Because you you know that there's an audience because there's a bunch of books that contains the types of stories that you like to read, and then so if you write something like the stories that you like to read, you're going to have an audience, and moreover, you're going to know who to market them to. And I think that some people, not everybody, but I encounter a surprisingly large number of people who really haven't read the genre that they write in, which kind of blows me away. Um, I've probably read somewhere between 5 and 10,000 books that are in the genre that I write, and I really don't think that I could have done as well as I have if I didn't do that. I also did a crazy thing too, where I was thinking about like how humans would advance and how civilization and society would advance. And I was thinking about like all the different technologies that we see sort of be the linchpin of different stories. And I thought to myself, like, what if instead of just coming up with one of these linchpin technologies, we discovered them all. Like all of them turned out to be possible. And sort of the bonus it gave me from doing that was that I I was able to like just jam so many tropes into my book. That wasn't fully intentional. I mean, it was intentional to put them all in, but I wasn't thinking about it from a marketing perspective. I lucked out in that regard. Oh yeah, James, I for many years of my life, I read over 300 books a year, uh, and some years it was more. So it's and they were almost entirely sci-fi after a certain point. So yeah, it's probably going all the way back to being 13 or 14 years old. 300 books a year. So that's 3,000 books in 10 years. And some years were more because there were years I read more than a book a day because I would devour them because I'm crazy like that. I used to skip class and just sit in the library at the school and read books. And to this day, I don't know why the librarians didn't like call me out on it. I was kind of sitting in a corner, but they were bustling around. They saw me, they saw me there at 8:30, 10, 11, leaving at noon. So I have no idea how those, I mean, they're probably like, yay, it's a kid that likes to read. We're just going to let him do that. Um, so yeah, that's totally, I think where a lot of that happened. Yeah. I can really see that, James, writing D&D adventures being a big help because like when I talk about my writing process, um actually segue off of that's going to segue me back onto it. um I was recording with the Two Authors podcast yesterday. I think they said it's going to be going live like April 27th or something, uh, with Doug and, oh goodness, Frank. I suddenly forget the other guy's name. I think it was Frank. It just seems too obvious. Doug and Frank just seems like exactly who would be running a podcast like that. And they asked me if I'm a plotter or a pantser when I was telling about how big my universe is and everything. And I said, well, I'm a pantser. I said, I know where the story's going to go, but I don't know exactly how the characters are going to get it there. And I said, but the thing that really helps me is I have a very clearly defined setting. I know where everything is, how all the rules work. So if I drop my characters into any place, um, I'm going to know what all the possibilities are right away. So the characters can make smart decisions um, that don't just seem arbitrary. They actually make sense within the context of the world that they're in. And they're like, that's kind of like plotting in a way. And to be honest, I never really thought of that as plotting. I think of that as just setting building. And while I've never written D&D adventures, it feels a lot like a D&D adventure. And I actually describe it that way. I say like, hey, I know where everything's going on, what's going on in the world. I know who my characters are and what they're like, and I just drop them into the setting and say, what are you going to do? Which I feel like is a lot like, DMing a D&D game. It's awesome that you write what you like to read. Your metaphysics series though really wouldn't doesn't really fit in PWF Cozy Mystery though, right? Are we talking about a different series? I'm marginally confused. But but yeah, I really do feel like that the setting building that I did allowed me to function. And I couldn't really make a strong argument against that being plotting in a way, because I have plotted out the setting in such a way that it's going to guide my characters where I want them to go. Like the best options they're going to have. Usually, sometimes they do crazy shit, but the best options um, they're going to have are are the ones that are going to take them where I want the story to go. So one could definitely make an argument that that is plotting. I also think that something that authors don't think about too much when they're thinking about their foundation is actually understanding grammar. Um, and this is much less of a marketing thing than perhaps we're going to be talking about when we actually do the course in school. But man, a lot of authors when they first start writing don't really understand even where commas go. Um, you've got authors who like basically never use commas, and then you have the authors who went to like the Captain Kirk school of commas, where you just speak dramatically and put commas anywhere where you'd pause. And and I think actually that a lot of authors could do really well to like read something, to have something like the Chicago Manual of Style, but that can be kind of daunting. So maybe use one of the websites like Grammar Girl or something like that, and try to understand really how to structure sentences, how to structure paragraphs. I think a lot of authors, when they really start going on their books, they're not they're just they're excited to write a story, which I think makes a ton of sense. It's perfect. That's the best reason to get into writing books. But if you don't understand a bunch of the rules of the grammatical rules, then you're going to be rewriting that story a lot. Um, And then when you have to, like, you want to take it to an editor or you want to talk to an agent, if you want to go trad pub or something like that, they're going to look at your work and they're going to be like, this is not good. This is not up to snuff. And that can be really demoralizing and require you to do a lot of rework. Um, and if if you don't have a strong enough foundation in that, then you're pretty much looking at a rewrite. 'Cause if you don't understand how to exit and enter, you know, um, quoted text, quoted dialogue, and all sorts of other things, and you're starting over. You don't understand. Like I've worked with people who like sort of like doing like really basic critiques and whatnot at events and stuff, who didn't understand that you have to start a new paragraph when you change speakers. And then to go to what James says, you don't have to start a new paragraph when you change speakers. There's ways where you can break that rule and have it still work. But it requires a ton of skill and the right situation to do certain things like that. So yeah, absolutely have to know the rules so you know when to break them. 100%. Like half of the way I write is not technically grammatically correct by any particular rule set, but it's consistent within my own rule set. So I'm okay with that, and I think because I'm super consistent about it, no one's actually ever called me out on it, which still blows my mind to this day that I don't follow the rules of UK, Canadian, or US English, and I've never been called out on it. I do get called out on some of my word choices sometimes when I spell things ways or use words in ways that people aren't familiar with. And I just tell them that dictionaries are free, so they can. So dictionary.com is free. You can go look it up. Uh, so that's always well received when I say it like that too. I don't actually say it like that. I don't think I do, at least. I might have said it like that once or twice when I was particularly annoyed with someone. Uh, and then beyond that, um, the one thing I think that reading a lot of books does for people is it helps us innately understand story. But I really think there's actually no substitute for also like getting a bit of an education in how story really works, because we can't always perfectly internalize things just by experiencing them. Sometimes you need to sit down and actually like do some analysis and see what actually is happening behind the scenes, because a really well crafted story doesn't feel like it's going through all the steps. It just feels natural. So the steps that the story has to go through become occluded. And and I think for a lot of us, certainly growing up in Canada, we had a lot of education in this. We spent a lot of time in English classes learning about 3 act plays and 5 act plays and how that maps onto regular novels as well, and how you can track rising action and the different acts of the story. Um, Turning points, point of no return, the inciting incident. Like we studied all of that in school and actually had to be able to storyboard out a book and tell the teacher, in a presentation where these different things happened in the book. Um, and the teacher would like give you books that they knew so they could actually follow up on you and whatnot, or follow along and know if you're just smoking crack or not. Um, and I'm not entirely sure that everybody learned that sort of thing in school. I don't think a lot of school systems teach all that sort of stuff, and a lot of people go into writing story without like a really clear understanding of that. Now that being said, like when I write a book, I don't have it strongly in mind um, that I need like a really strong hook, and I need an inciting incident. Like that's not in my head. I'm not like, what's the darkest moment, or something like that. I just like put characters through what I think is like a compelling and interesting series of events, and have the characters act like real people, and that sort of all comes through. But I also do feel like upon in retrospect, I've realized that a lot of my books are basically just they're like Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just a series of climactic events strung together by short interludes. And it also starts off with like a climactic event as well that is oftentimes not super directly related to the story. It's like really it builds the characters and stuff like that, but it's not actually like super related to the stories. Uh, so Victoria says, I've wondered often lately if the English language is evolving due to the text trend these days. Two or more sentences run together without punctuation, lacking verbs, and intentionally misspelled. I mean, probably to some degree, but I experienced this before text messaging was a thing. So, um, so I don't know this entirely texting. Although I think that probably the way people speak in text is having a deleterious effect on their ability to write properly. Most of the time, when I write anywhere online, I'm actually writing in complete sentences with periods and stuff like that. And then if Gen Z gets triggered by my use of a period, then I think it'll be a growing experience for both of us in that case. But it is kind of the idea is actually kind of interesting that and language does evolve, right? So obviously language is going through a shift and it will totally evolve. But, books and stories themselves are still, I think, pretty consistently written in how they work. So I think that's really important too. I suspect everybody here listening to me has most of these things licked. Um, but I always do like oftentimes I will pop into people's books and I don't know I'm not speaking about anyone here because I've actually everybody is speaking right now. I don't well, I haven't done a deep dive into any of your books. Um, I have looked at authors' books before and I've been like, oh shoot, I know why this isn't selling. And we've actually had to like work on the book before we could get it to sell. So that's a thing that definitely does happen. People can get entire books written, and the book doesn't follow the rules well enough um, to be approachable by readers. Like readers will come to it and they can't follow it properly, and they won't carry along. And so if you write your books and they're not grabbing people, they're not pulling them in, you're not doing because there are things that just work. And that's why they're like shorthands. That's why we have things like Chekhov's gun and Save the Cat and stuff like that because they just work. Um, if you want to have a character that's an asshole, you need to give them their Save the Cat moment really early on, um, because if you don't, then they're just going to be assholes, you know. And to harken back to my favorite example in Indiana Jones, Indy saves the guy that's with him, who then later betrays him, and you don't feel nearly as bad when Indy just makes a sarcastic remark about the guy dying. And they did that to make Indy, who is kind of an unlikable guy in a lot of regards, right? Like he's a bit of an asshole. He's kind of not that nice to Marion at the very beginning. Um, but they do the save the cat moment with them to make him more likable later on, so they can get away with him being a bit of a hard ass later on. Um, and that's like a technique that works super well, and that's why it's got like a name that people really know. So I think there's no substitute for really understanding a lot of those things. I certainly didn't understand a lot of those nuances when I started writing. So only through the dint of reading a massive volume of books did I actually do well because I internalized a lot of this stuff. And honestly, I kind of lucked out. But if I hadn't been like a ridiculously voracious reader, I might have made some really awful mistakes. And actually, when I go back and I look at stuff that I wrote when I was a lot younger, I absolutely had all sorts of mistakes in there. I had just long plodding openings to books and stuff like that weren't interesting and didn't grab attention. And I didn't understand pacing and I didn't understand, when you're doing a three-act play, one scene is above the line and then the next scene is below the line, above the line, below the line. And the above the line scenes are things happening and the below the line scenes are reflection. I mean, Indiana Jones is I think it's like a five-act play technically. But it's actually like a perfect example of that sort of thing. So I think there's really no way around that. And then of course, you have to then move into how are you crafting the overarching story? And I think a lot of I think something that definitely has changed in the author community, and this is more people that have been are in it, and a part of the community versus people who are just starting out, but is that we actually really are thinking a lot about how am I structuring a series? How are these books going to flow together? Is if it's going to be a six-book series about a group of guys who all meet the love of their life at some point, and each guy then becomes a book in the series. I need to introduce all six guys right away. Um, in book one, I need to give if the guy from book two is like a grumpy asshole who is redeemable, then he needs to have a save the cat moment in book one, right? Like we're as I think as a whole, authors are getting a lot better at thinking about that sort of thing and planning that sort of thing out. Um, I do think that sometimes we still just sort of dive into a series, right? We're just like, uh, I want to write this story about these characters. I'm just going to go for it, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But sometimes you might have to like rewrite some things when you get further along and realize that you might not have you might not have planned everything out as well as you wanted, and now you've got to go back and fix some things. But that's also part of the process. Um, I think one of the things that does happen as well that happens is the more you think about how you want your story to go, the less words you have to leave on the cutting room floor, which I think is really important too, because I think as authors, one of the things that is really important for authors to succeed as a career in this as a career is the ability to produce the product. And the more product that you can produce, the better. And unfortunately, for most of us, we are making the product, packaging the product, marketing the product, selling the product, and supporting the product. Um, it's like five or six people's jobs all rolled into one. Oh, and then you're also the bookkeeper for the business as well. Um, most of the time, um, when you get bigger, you can hire someone else out for that, but then you still have to make sure they're doing a good job. Um, so it's a lot, and honestly, making the product is already a full time job. Like it's as much work as anybody else does in the full time job to make the product, and the the more of the product that you can make, the more potential revenue you have. And one of the ways to make more product is to have to less do overs, right? If you can get it right the first time or closer to right the first time, then you're going to be in a situation where you don't have to do as much reworking on the story and get it going a lot faster. James is convenient here because I think James is on wrapping book four of the year so far. No, you're on book five now, I think. If we count, because I think you started one in December. If we count the one you started in December, then you're on book five for the year, right? And when you're putting out that many books, it, there quantity has a quality all of its own. I think is how the saying goes, and I think that's absolutely true. And it allows you, well, one, it allows you to weather flops a lot better. Is a really big thing because no matter how good you are at this, you're going to write books that flop. And oftentimes they're going to be books that you really liked writing, and probably even knew as you were writing it that this is probably not going to be super commercially viable. Although I've done ones where I thought it was going to be killer. I thought like everybody's going to love this. This is going to be like my breakout in into a new subgenre. I was right, James. I was keeping track. But the ones where I thought like it was going to be this amazing breakout, and it went nowhere. Like they'll find like their hardcore fans who love them, but really like it never got legs on its own. Never did what I hoped it would do. Um, and and having a lot of books out, producing a lot of books allows you to weather those things. Um, and I think this is something that happens to a lot of authors who maybe hit it really big at the beginning as well. They don't realize that they're going to have flops because at the very beginning, maybe everything that they do is golden. Um, I didn't get that. I had 4 years of not really getting anywhere with my books before I finally figured out how to find my audience. Um, and so I think of some authors who start out really strong don't really have it, don't understand that they're going to have to weather some flops. And when you're planning out sort of your strategy as an author, your vision, we sometimes be like, oh well, I'm increasing at this rate. I will increase at this rate forever. It's like, nope, you're gonna get a reset or two in there where you jump back. Yeah, yeah. I'm not surprised, James. Yeah, I that one that I had that flopped, I made it was a whole trilogy too, because I'm like that, right? Like even if it flops, I gotta finish the story. Uh, So because I hate the idea of having I hate the idea of having like something undone. And I can handle like two or three undone things hanging out there, but anything more than that, I'll start to lose it. So I currently have three series that are in flight, and one of them could be seen as a bit of a standalone, so I can kind of get away with maybe not going on with that one. I really want to because the character's so cool. So so yeah. So there's just some of the things I'm thinking about, and I really actually appreciate you guys' thoughts too on what you think makes a strong author foundation. Um, and I think it actually really needs to be broken out into multiple components too, right? Like your preparation to be an actual author. Like what did you do to get ready to be an author? Which is like reading and understanding things. And then the other one is like really understanding how to build out series and a brand. And not just brand as in like what font is my author name in, but like what are you writing? How are they going to tie it together? How are you going to pull readers from one thing to the next? Because in business, the most expensive thing is client acquisition. If you can get a client, in our case, a reader, and get them to then purchase from you multiple times, that's where the actual money is. People who come in and just buy once, you probably lose money on them if you had to get them through marketing. So it's, how can I do how can I make so the first part's all about how to make the right products so client acquisition is cheaper. And then the second part is all about how do I get these people to read more than one of my books? Because that's where you actually find your profit. And then after that, then there's all of the stuff around marketing and actually building out like a bigger readership and all that jazz. So there's a lot of layers I think that we're going to tackle in the full course for this. James, yes, I feel that so strongly. I have that exact same issue where I'm just like, but I need to know where the story goes. I'll never know if I don't write it, so I've got to do it. Yes. Which, and if you're only doing three books a year, that's not great. If you're like James and you're getting, just shy of a book a month, then it's a different story. PJ Skinner says I wrote a whole series that was impossible to market first, and then had a twisted trope, twisted trope in my next, which made it hard to sell. My third series is going brilliantly because it fits in this category. I'm glad to hear that you got the third one that really hit it, and that's not uncommon either for authors to have that happen, where it takes a bit to find the right thing. But the cool thing about this is that you're prepared now for like things that don't work, and then what do you do to pivot? You've got that skill now. What else we have? Which works well with jaded readers. I'm not. Oh, okay. I understand what you mean there. Yes. Yeah, I like that. That's really good, Victoria. That you got that skill understanding those things, and that got you to understand the characters, and then you can put the characters into places and have them work. Read, publish, write, publish, repeat. I thought I could do this, so I started doing it. Oh, you read the book. I read the word is read and not read. I don't know. All right. But you've also, from the sounds of you've read a fair number of books. I mean, 2,000 books is nothing to slouch, to scoff at either. Um, 7 years for instant success. I got you beat, PJ. It only took me 4 years to have instant success. I mean, actually, if you count the um, 20 years I wrote books before that went nowhere, then yeah, 24 years um, of instant success. I like that. That's a really good way of thinking about that. Like I'd say that to authors too. Like when people like are working on getting a book to sell and they're struggling and whatnot, I'm like, remember, like you're currently in author marketing school. You're paying the tuition right now. You're learning skills that are going to help you going forward. So it's not like if you were to go to author marketing school, it would cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Um, if it's an actual like university sort of thing. So the fact that you have to spend a bunch of money trying things and learning and taking some courses and stuff like that isn't unreasonable when you think about like what you have to learn to run a business. Have you? I'm guessing you've also read a lot of books that are like that as well, Victoria. Women's fiction that have um, the, the fantasy bent. Because I'm not super familiar with them, but I'm guessing there must be a. Well, actually, I know of a couple off the top of my head too, so they're definitely out there. I don't want to drone on forever because after a while I start to make a lot less sense. But if anyone had any last thoughts they wanted to share on things that they think were a big part of their author foundation, that'd be awesome. Uh, we're doing still our advanced Facebook ads class, which has 2 more sessions. Um, and then we'll probably take like a week or so off. So probably first week of June, we're going to kick off a course on building a strong author foundation and talking about all the things. And this one might actually have some homework and stuff like that in this next course that I think will actually be. I think it's going to be a really interesting one. It's going to be sort of an angle that we've never done before, but I think there's going to be some interesting things in there, and we're going to be getting to share some really cool ideas and things that we've seen work for other people. I might even see if I can get some other guests, get at least one guest speaker for that, but I don't know for sure or not because it's always hard to find someone who's willing to actually talk about all that stuff for quite a while. Thank you, Sith and Rose. You bet, James. We will absolutely see you at the sprint later. You're welcome, Victoria. You're 100% welcome. Should I market my first book or when I have 3? If you're doing paid marketing, like something like Facebook ads, generally it's hard to be profitable until you have 3 books out to be. If you are just working on building readers and you've got a pre-order for book 2 up or something like that, then you can sort of like possibly market at only a small loss, but you're building readership, which you can pay off later. But one of the options, of course, is to do a reader magnet that sits before book 1 that helps you build your mailing list, and that can be worth it as well. Thank you, PJ. It's a bit of a different look, but I actually love wearing these sort of like these open face hoods. I think, like I said at the beginning, it hides my double chin, so I feel really makes me feel really good. But I will see all of you fabulous folks later. I hope you guys have a great afternoon and an awesome weekend. And for those of you doing the advanced Facebook ads class, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And then sprints in an hour for people who are in school and want to sprint. Well, a little bit over an hour, hour and 15. All right. Ciao. Bye, everyone.